It was a rainy Thursday afternoon in Port Harcourt. The streets were wet and shiny like glass, rainwater running in thin streams by the gutters. At the busy junction near Remulla, two police officers waved down a sleek black Prado Jeep. Tinted windows were nothing new in the city. Most wealthy men preferred it, but this one had been mentioned in an anonymous call just half an hour earlier. The voice on the phone had been urgent. "Officer, check that car. Something inside is not clean." The Jeep slowed, the wipers sweeping water off the windshield. It came to a stop beside the officers. One stepped forward, hand resting on his holster. The back door opened. A man stepped out, tall and broad, wearing a spotless white suit and a red tie so sharp it almost hurt the eyes. His bald head glistened in the drizzle, and when he smiled, a single gold tooth flashed like morning sun on still water. "Good afternoon, officer," he said in a voice as soft as slow-boiling water. "I am Pastor Nathan Obiora, General Overseer of Holy Fire Dominion Chapel. I have a crusade this evening. God bless you." But the officer didn't return the smile. His eyes scanned Nathan from head to toe. "Sir, please open your boot," the officer said calmly. Nathan blinked. His tone stayed gentle, but tight. "There's nothing inside," he said. "Just routine, sir," the officer replied. "It will only take a minute." Nathan checked his wristwatch. "I am a man of God," he said slowly. "I'm already late for the crusade. Souls are waiting for me." The second officer stepped closer. "Just open the boot, sir, and you'll be on your way." Nathan sighed. Slowly, he reached into his inner pocket and pulled out a fat bundle of foreign currency, crisp notes stacked thick like a loaf of yam. "Take this, my sons," he murmured. "Forget about the boot. Let me do God's work." The air shifted. The officers exchanged glances. One shook his head. "We don't need your money, Pastor," he said. "Open the boot now." Nathan's smile vanished. His hand dropped to his side. His body stiffened. "If you won't open it," the officer warned, "we will." They walked to the back of the Jeep. Nathan followed slowly, rain sliding down his face, mixing with the sweat on his skin. The first officer pressed the button. The boot clicked open, and the world seemed to freeze. Inside, wrapped in blood-soaked white cloth, lay two freshly severed human heads. The smell punched the air like hot pepper, thick and choking. One officer staggered back, hand over his nose. Another shouted, "Blood of Jesus." People gathered, some screaming, some fainting. A woman in the crowd collapsed to her knees, crying out, "No, no, not Daddy." Phones came out recording. Within minutes, news spread like wildfire through Port Harcourt. The man known for feeding widows, giving scholarships, and praying for the jobless now stood beside a car carrying death. And worse, those heads belonged to his own daughters, Amara and Kem, the same girls he had told everyone were studying in Canada. At Mile 3 Market, a trader dropped her basket of tomatoes when she heard the news. "Canada," she gasped. He said they were doing master's degrees. Men sitting at a beer table nearby went silent, their bottles untouched. A schoolteacher whispered, "What kind of father would do that?" No one answered. The question felt heavier than stone. Across the city, buses, shops, and homes buzzed with the same words. Why would Pastor Nathan kill his own blood? But no one knew. In the air, confusion swirled with the smell of wet dust after rain. Long before the white suit and the red tie, Nathan had simply been Enoch Obiora, the quiet son of Reverend Isaiah Obiora, the famous Lion of Zion Light Apostolic Church. Reverend Isaiah's voice could shake walls, and his prayers could draw tears from the proudest man. He was called fire from heaven. Isaiah had 4 sons, all of them drawn into ministry. Jonah, the eldest, roared during deliverance prayers like a soldier fighting devils face to face. Daniel, the second, was polished and stylish, his sermons sharp enough to win over politicians. Micah, the third, didn't speak much but claimed to hear angels, his touch making people collapse in tears. And then there was Nathan, the last son, gentle, slow-speaking, never flashy. After their father's death, the brothers each took different ministries. Nathan inherited the old church building, Zion Light, and renamed it Holy Fire Dominion Chapel. He didn't perform dramatic miracles. Instead, he fed widows, bought books for children, and paid rent for struggling families. People loved him for his kindness, not for signs and wonders. But while his brothers' churches grew into sprawling cathedrals with international branches, Nathan's remained small. He watched Jonah's crusades draw tens of thousands, Daniel's ministry appear on television, and Micah's prophecies go viral. In public, he smiled. In private, he felt like an empty drum, full of sound for others, hollow inside. The breaking point came one Sunday evening at a grand crusade in Ori. The four brothers stood on the same stage for the first time since their father's funeral. A challenge was announced. Each would demonstrate the power of God by ministering to someone in desperate need. For people were brought forward: a man who couldn't walk, a blind man, a mute woman, and a man raving in madness. The crowd fell silent, drums stopping mid-beat. First, Jonah prayed over the crippled man, who rose and walked. The place erupted. Next, Daniel touched the blind man's face, and the man cried out, "I can see." The cheers grew louder. Then Micah wiped the mute woman's mouth with a handkerchief, and her first words in years filled the air. "Thank you." The crowd sang praises. Then it was Nathan's turn. His task was the madman: wild eyes, tangled hair, chained to two ushers. Nathan stepped forward, his voice low. "In Jesus' name," he prayed. The man laughed in his face. Nathan prayed louder. The man barked like a dog. Oil was poured. The man spat. Nathan knelt, then stood, trying again and again, but nothing worked. The madman yanked his collar and screamed, "Leave me alone, empty man." The crowd gasped. Then came the whispers: maybe God didn't call him. Maybe he's not like his brothers. Nathan heard every word. That night, he sat in darkness, the sound of rain on the roof louder than his prayers. From that night, Nathan couldn't sleep. His mind was heavy, his prayers felt dry, and every amen from the congregation sounded weaker. On Sunday mornings, his church no longer echoed with clapping or singing. Empty chairs stared back at him. The whispers from Ori had followed him home like shadows. Finally, he decided to seek help from the only people he thought could understand: his brothers. His first stop was Abba, at the Mountain Flame Revival Ministries, where Jonah's church towered like a palace. The carpet was deep red, the ceiling fans wide as helicopter blades, and framed photographs of miracle healings covered the walls. Outside, the crowd shouted and wept under Jonah's booming voice. Nathan entered the office quietly. "Brother," he began, "what's your secret?" Jonah chuckled, leaning back. "Secret? There's no secret. Pray, fast, and believe the word." Nathan frowned. "I do all that. Still, nothing happens." Jonah's smile faded. "Are you saying God is not faithful?" The words felt like a slap. Nathan stood, feeling smaller than when he came. Next, he traveled to Lagos to see Daniel at Heaven's Cross Worship Center. The moment Nathan stepped into Daniel's office, the smell of expensive cologne filled the air. The space looked like a bank: polished marble floor, plush chairs, and a desk that could seat 4 people. Daniel welcomed him with a half-smile. "Little brother," he said, "what's troubling you?" Nathan leaned forward. "Tell me, what am I doing wrong?" Daniel tapped the arm of his chair. "Ministry is not just about prayer, it's about branding. Lights, stage, clothes, voice. People must see what they want to follow." Nathan blinked. "Branding?" Daniel nodded. "Yes. Look like power, and they will believe in your power." The advice didn't sit well. Nathan left Lagos more confused than when he arrived. His last visit was to Micah. Prophet Micah's home had no shiny furniture, no crowd at the gate. Just a long bench under a mango tree, where he sat gazing at the sky. Nathan joined him. "Brother," he said softly, "what's the secret to real power?" Micah turned slowly. "Some vessels carry fire, others carry water." Nathan's throat tightened. "You mean I'm not called for miracles?" Micah's gaze drifted back upward. "Everyone is called for something. Stop chasing what isn't yours." That night, Nathan sat barefoot on the floor of his hotel room, his Bible lying unopened beside him. He cried loudly, like a child lost in the market. His own blood, his brother's, had given him nothing but silence and riddles. He returned to Port Harcourt feeling emptier than ever. His church, once alive with singing, was now silent as a graveyard. The cleaners stopped showing up. Sundays came and went with only a handful of members scattered across the pews. Nathan's smile no longer reached his eyes. Grace, his wife, watched the man she married fade away. One evening, without raising her voice, she packed her clothes into a black nylon bag. "This stress is too much," she said, standing by the door. "I'm leaving before I lose myself." Nathan said nothing. The door didn't slam, it sighed. After Grace left, the house felt too large, too quiet. Amara and Kem, his two daughters, stopped calling him Daddy with joy. They stayed locked in their room most of the time. Nathan began telling church members that the girls had traveled to Canada to study medicine and law. But it was a lie. He had taken their phones and kept the windows shut, claiming it was for their protection. He whispered about witches and jealous pastors who might harm them. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. The laughter of his daughters became a memory. And then came a morning when he stood by their door, listening to the stillness inside. It was the kind of silence that made the hairs on his neck rise. He didn't open the door. He didn't call their names. He just walked away. When the police later found their heads in his Jeep, wrapped in blood-soaked cloth, the question why spread across the city like wildfire. But the answer was hidden far from the cameras, buried in the shadows of Nathan's desperation. That desperation had taken him one night to Enugu, down a lonely road lined with tall trees. His headlights cut through the darkness until he reached a small bungalow surrounded by flickering candles. The door opened before he could knock. A barefoot man stood there, eyes sharp like a blade fresh from the fire. His lips didn't move, but his voice filled Nathan's head. "I know why you've come." Nathan's legs felt weak, but he managed to speak. I want power," he whispered. The man's eyes narrowed. "Not the kind from the Bible," he said, "but the one that opens blind eyes, makes the lame walk, and makes the world bow." Nathan nodded slowly. His heart pounded. Then, the man continued, "Give the spirits what they eat. Not prayer. Not fasting. Blood." Nathan stepped back. "What kind of blood?" The man's smile was slow and cold. "The blood of love. The blood that shakes your heart." Nathan's mouth went dry. "You mean someone I love?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he walked back into the house and shut the door, leaving Nathan in the night air, his thoughts churning like a storm. He returned to his hotel, tossed on the bed, and prayed until his throat burned. But the hunger to be like his brothers, to have the crowds, the miracles, the respect, clung to him like wet clothes. 1 week later, Nathan returned to the bungalow. This time, the man was waiting at the door. No greeting, no small talk. He handed Nathan a clay bowl and a folded paper with a list written in strange ink. Then he dipped his fingers into a black paste and drew symbols on Nathan's chest. The air smelled of smoke and something sour. That night, Nathan made an oath, not with pen and paper, but with something far darker. The following Sunday, Holy Fire Dominion Chapel felt different. The air inside was heavy, almost thick, like an unseen presence was watching. Nathan stood at the altar, hands steady, eyes calm. He didn't shout. He didn't sweat. "You stand," he said to a blind woman in the front row. Her eyes opened, and she screamed, "I can see." The congregation erupted. People jumped, some wept, others fainted. Then Nathan laid a hand on a boy in a wheelchair. "Walk," he whispered. The boy's legs trembled, then straightened. Slowly he stood, then took one step, then another. When he ran, his mother collapsed on the floor, crying, "God has come down." Another woman, barren for 10 years, returned weeks later carrying 3 babies, triplets. She testified that one touch from the pastor had broken her curse. News spread faster than Harmattan fire. Cars lined the road leading to the church like a wedding convoy. When the small building overflowed, they brought more chairs, then tents, then more tents. Soon, the overflow crowd was large enough to form its own congregation outside. People came from Ghana, Kenya, and even London. Some carried wheelchairs, others hospital reports. "Touch me, Daddy," they cried. "Just your shadow, sir. Lay your hand, Papa." Nathan smiled for the cameras, but deep inside, something else smiled too. Something that had been fed. With the money flowing, he bought a black Lexus SUV, shiny and big like a moving palace. Then another. He built a cathedral shaped like a crown. He launched a TV program called Touch of Fire, aired every Sunday night. Politicians brought envelopes. Celebrities knelt for his prayers. The name Pastor Nathan was replaced with a new title, God's Battle Axe. But power from the shadows was never free. Every year, they came. Sometimes in dreams, sometimes in whispers that floated through his room at night. Feed us. Not with food. Not with animals. With blood. And not just any blood. Not strangers. Not sinners. Only the blood of love, the kind that tore pieces from his heart when it was spilled. The first year, he gave them his cousin, the man who had helped him build his first church hall. The next year, it was his uncle, the one who raised him after their father died. Then a close friend. Then his young choir leader. Each time, the miracles returned in full force, and the crowds grew louder. No one asked questions. People care about power, not where it comes from. But Nathan began to change. His laughter became short, his eyes colder. After each sacrifice, his hands shook. He told himself he was giving pieces of his heart to keep the light burning in his ministry, but deep down, he knew he was feeding the dark. The weight grew heavier every year, until one day, the only thing left to give was his own blood and bone. That day came quietly. There was no thunder, no sign in the sky, just the familiar whisper in the night. "It's time. Give us the blood that matters most." Nathan sat upright in bed, staring into the darkness. His heart knew what they meant. He thought of Amara's laughter, of Nkem's habit of hugging him from behind. He closed his eyes, but their faces wouldn't leave. By morning, he had made his choice. He told himself it was only to protect them, that by giving them to the spirits, they would be safe in another realm. He locked their bedroom door, shutting out the world. The windows were already sealed. Their phones were long gone. When the moment came, he didn't let himself look in their eyes for too long. Afterward, the house was so silent, he thought even the walls were holding their breath. Days later, Nathan drove through Yucca. Rain had washed the roads clean, but the air was heavy. His hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. In the boot of the Lexus lay the proof of his bargain, 2 bundles wrapped in blood-soaked cloth. He didn't pray. He didn't hum a hymn. He just drove. At a police checkpoint, the wave came. "Evening, sir. Open your boot." Nathan's first instinct was to refuse. The officers insisted. When they moved to open it themselves, his breath caught in his throat. The boot lifted, the cloth shifted, and one corner fell away. The sight froze them. 2 severed heads, still fresh, still warm. One officer dropped his gun. Another staggered back, muttering, "Jesus Christ." A third shouted for the patrol van. Passers-by gathered. Phones came out. The first pictures were already flying across WhatsApp before Nathan's wrists were cuffed. A woman in the crowd screamed, "Not Pastor Nathan. Not Daddy." But no one stepped forward to defend him. They took him to the station. The interrogation room was small, lit by a single flickering bulb. Nathan sat on a metal chair, his white robe now stained with dust and something darker. The officer across from him didn't speak at first. He simply pushed a file across the table. "Talk." Nathan's eyes filled. "I didn't want this," he whispered. But once the words started, they wouldn't stop. He spoke of the night in Enugu, of meeting Prophet Malachi, of the oath sealed not with ink but with blood. His voice broke when he said, "They told me, if I wanted power like my brothers, I had to give the blood of someone I loved." The officers exchanged glances. "How long?" one asked. Nathan swallowed hard.
6 years, he said.
6 people.
Cousin.
Uncle. Friend. Choir girl. And he stopped, staring at the table. And the last, my daughters. The words came out in a whisper, but they hit the room like an explosion. Silence fell. Even the hum of the ceiling fans seemed to vanish. One officer stood abruptly and left the room, slamming the door behind him. Another closed the file, without a word. Nathan sat hunched, his head bowed like a broken tree in the wind. Far away, in a quiet village with red sand roads, Mama Ruth sat under a mango tree peeling cassava. Her wrapper was tied firm, her face soft with age and peace. A boy from town ran into the compound, panting. Mama, your son, Pastor Nathan, they caught him. Human heads inside his car. The knife slipped from her hand. What did you say? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The boy nodded quickly, eyes wide. It's everywhere. They say 2 heads, his daughters. Mama Ruth's hands trembled. The cassava pieces fell into the sand. She stared past the boy, as if the air might offer an explanation. Amara, Nkem? She asked, her voice breaking. The boy said nothing. She didn't need his answer. She knew. A low wail escaped her lips, the kind only a mother can make when her heart is tearing in two. By evening, the news had spread to every corner of the village. Some people wept openly. Others sat in silence, shaking their heads. Old men gathered under the Udala tree, murmuring about how the devil could dress like a man of God. We knew him as a child, one said. He was quiet, respectful. Who knew darkness was waiting inside. Another shook his head. It is hunger for power. It can turn even a good man into a beast. Back in Port Harcourt, crowds gathered outside the police station. Some came to gawk, others to curse, and a few still hoping it was all a lie. He prayed for my mother when she was sick, one woman cried. She got well. How can he be evil? Another spat on the ground. Miracles from darkness. We were blind. The debate raged, but the evidence sat locked in the police evidence room, cold and undeniable. Inside his cell, Nathan sat alone. The other inmates avoided him, whispering about the man who killed his own blood. His Bible lay untouched in the corner. Some nights, he stared at it for hours, but never opened it. When the lights went out, he swore he still heard the whispers feed us. Only now there was nothing left to give. A week later, he was brought to court for his first hearing. The crowd outside was thick, pushing against police barricades. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Nathan kept his head down, his wrists chained. In the front row sat Mama Ruth, her eyes red but dry. She didn't speak to him. She didn't call his name. She just watched him walk past like a stranger. The prosecutor's voice was cold. The accused, Pastor Nathan Obiora, is charged with the ritual murder of 6 individuals over 6 years, including his 2 daughters. The court gasped. Nathan kept his eyes on the floor. He didn't plead innocence. He didn't cry. He just stood, waiting for the charges to finish like a man already carrying his own sentence. Evidence was presented. Photographs from the boot of his SUV, the strange symbols found carved into the floor of his bedroom, and the testimonies of neighbors who had not seen the girls for months. A detective described finding traces of blood under the carpet, even after it had been scrubbed. The judge's face stayed stone still. Outside, opinion had shifted fully. Those who once defended him now turned away when his name was mentioned. His TV program was pulled from the air. Politicians who once sought his prayers deleted their photographs with him from social media. Holy Fire Dominion Chapel was locked, its signboard taken down. The building sat empty, the once bright paint fading under sun and rain. In the village, Mama Ruth no longer went to the market. She stayed indoors, speaking little. Sometimes at night, neighbors swore they heard her praying, asking God where she went wrong. Other times, she simply sat on her veranda, staring at the road as though waiting for someone who would never return. In his cell, Nathan finally picked up his Bible. He flipped to the book of Psalms, his fingers trembling. But before he could read, a voice, familiar and cold, whispered in the corner of his mind. You fed us. You are ours." He closed the book and pressed it to his chest, rocking back and forth. The miracles had ended. The crowds had vanished. And all that remained was the debt he could never repay. Weeks turned into months. Nathan's trial dragged on, but the outcome was clear from the start. The prosecutors were relentless, the evidence overwhelming. Every time he was brought to court, the crowd outside grew larger, not in support, but in fury. They shouted his name like a curse. Murder, ritualist. Some threw stones, others spat. Nathan never raised his head. One rainy morning, the judge delivered the verdict. Guilty on all counts. The sentence, death by hanging. Gasps filled the courtroom. Mama Ruth sat in the back, her hands folded tightly on her lap. She didn't cry. She simply nodded once, as if she had been expecting this all along. Nathan glanced her way, his eyes pleading, but she looked past him, her gaze fixed on the wooden crucifix hanging above the judge's bench. In the days that followed, he was moved to the condemned prisoner's block. The air there was heavy, as if it knew every breath was borrowed. His cell was smaller now, the window just a narrow slit. Sometimes, in the deep of night, he heard other prisoners crying in their sleep. He never joined them. His own grief was a silent, private thing, too large for tears. One evening, a prison chaplain visited him. "Do you want to confess to God?" the man asked gently. Nathan gave a small smile. "I've been confessing since the night they caught me," he said. "But the problem is, I don't know if he's still listening." The chaplain sighed, laid a hand on his shoulder, and prayed anyway. Nathan kept his eyes shut, but in his mind, the whispers still echoed. "Feed us." Outside the prison walls, life moved on. Holy Fire Dominion Chapel remained locked, its once bright banners torn by the wind. The street vendors who used to sell snacks outside on Sundays had long since moved to other corners of the city. The plot of land where the cathedral stood began to grow weeds. To the neighbors, it looked like the earth itself wanted to swallow the memory. In the village, Mama Ruth's health began to fail. She rarely spoke, and when she did, her words wandered. "He was a good boy once," she would tell anyone who listened. "He used to help me fetch water. He had gentle hands." But those who sat with her could see her eyes clouding with questions she would never get answered. The people of Port Harcourt slowly stopped talking about Pastor Nathan. New scandals came, new headlines took his place. But for those who had been healed in his crusades, the memory was complicated. A miracle in their body, a curse in their mind. Some still whispered prayers for his soul. Others prayed for God to wipe his name from the earth. On the morning of his execution, the sky was strangely clear. Nathan was let out, his steps slow but steady. He wore no robe, no suit, just the plain clothes of a prisoner. As he approached the gallows, he looked out over the small crowd allowed to witness. In the back, behind two guards, Mama Ruth stood. She did not wave. She did not cry. But her eyes met his, and for a second, the noise around him faded. The rope was placed around his neck. A voice read the formal statement of his crimes. Nathan closed his eyes, and in the darkness, he saw Mara and Kem, not as they were in their last moments, but as little girls running barefoot in the compound, laughing. He tried to speak, but the words stuck in his throat. The lever was pulled. When it was over, the crowd left in silence. No one celebrated, no one sang. The city that had once hailed him as God's battle axe now carried his story like a wound. Somewhere far away, in the village, Mama Ruth sat under the mango tree again, peeling cassava. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint sound of church bells from another town. She paused, closed her eyes, and whispered, "God, have mercy on my son."